Hello guys, and welcome to Just Draw Just Paint part 12. This week we are going to be drawing up some kind of ogre slash orc character, which, as you guys may think, is a lot of fun to draw. And you're right, it is incredibly fun to draw, which is why I did it, because I'm selfish like that. I just want to do what I want to do this week and bring up a cool character. So before I jump into any of that, we're just going to be drawing a bunch of blobby thumbnails to try and find a pose, try and find some proportions, the usual hullabaloo that we do in this series to find what we're looking for. Now, I do want to say that this week I'm going to be taking the final character into a tight drawing, which took way too much time, but I was happy to do for you guys just so that you could see what a final polish on a character looks like, because as you know, I work things up in stages, and I like to have the final stage be the final stage, right? I don't like to work on my details too early in a drawing because it makes me deeply insecure, and I have no idea what is going on and how to control it if I do it that way. So this is my process, right? This is the process I use when I am concepting characters for a studio or for a client. This is what I do. You know, sometimes the client sees this stuff, but I would say rarely, because look at it, right? If I showed this to a client, they'd be like, what the hell, man? Are you drawing Earthworm Jim? What is this? It's ugly, right? These blobby Ghostbuster ghosts, like, get out of here. We don't want to see that. So if it's tight, if I tighten up the thumbnails, which I rarely do, then I'll show it. But if not, I'll usually show a sketch, which is probably the next stage after this. And if that's cool, we move on, right? But keep in mind, every single time I'm doing one of these videos for you guys, a lot of the time I'm just working up one character or one environment. Typically speaking, that's a very toxic way to work within a studio, because if you're the idea person and you're there to generate ideas, your job is to take as many of these forward as possible, right? So I would probably end up taking, 3 of these thumbnails and modifying them to be as different from one another as humanly possible, and then drawing them up and then detailing them over the space of a day or two in order to have something to show that is, very far along, right? And by the way, if you show an art director, halfway through and they don't like it, you can abandon it and do another one, right? So the process in a studio of just kind of getting to a final, sometimes it's not always straightforward. A lot of people say like, oh, you have to hit it the first time, and you can. Like, if you're extremely good at what you do, right, you can hit it harder than anyone else, and you are the best in your field. Awesome. I'm so happy for you. You guys rock. Keep going, I guess, and don't forget to help the small guys. But for us normal human beings, we kind of have to look at process, right? We have to understand, like, what is this? Is it working? Can we check in? Can we ask questions? Should this character have horns, or should it have a helmet, right? Like, that's what I'm deciding right now. And this is the kind of process I would do on one thumbnail and then apply it to the others, right, before I start working them up in any kind of meaningful detail. But I have a very good reference board with me here. I know what I'm going for because, I love ogres, I love orcs. I think they're the coolest, and I think that if we exaggerate this guy's anatomy, his perspective, if we give him some cool armor design, if we lean into some of the tropes but kind of change it a little bit, we'll end up with something fairly original and something fun to look at. I'm not going for max originality on this one, because the weird thing is that when we start to push things that everybody understands from a lore perspective too far, we start to break it, and people start questioning what it is. For example, if you have an elf, we all know elves have long ears, but if you make an elf with short ears, people don't know what that is. They can't say it's an elf. They'll be like, oh, it's a halfling, or it's a whatever, right? So we have to accept that on some level, the bald-looking, big-jawed, pointy-eared green guys are goblins or orcs, right? We have to class them in that place because that's what we've been subjected to for decades. We've been told that that's what it is. If you want to step outside of that, you're more than welcome to do it. But like I said earlier, you're going to alienate your audience. So what I always say to people is, if you're going to make something unique, try and just adjust it by like 10 to 20%. You don't have to go 100%. You don't have to go 90%. You can rein it 80% what people know, 20% what they don't. And if you do that, chances are they'll latch onto it and they'll go, okay, I understand what this is. It's clearly an orc. It's clearly an elf. It's clearly a kangaroo. Whatever you're drawing that people have to understand, it's immediately obvious that they can. As you can see here, I'm using different layers to work up layers on top of layers. Sometimes I like to do that when I have underlying structure, like a leg behind the club here. And I'll try preserve that for as long as possible until I don't need to anymore. And even then I'll keep the underdrawing so that I can see what's going on. Now, funnily enough, in the sketch process here, I'm just trying to lay in where everything should be and what it's going to be on this particular layer. But it's funny because drawing in that shoulder pad so quickly made me completely forget what perspective it's in, right? So I'm drawing it as though it's going away from you, but in actuality, it should be reversed, right? It should be going towards the orc because his arm is coming towards us. So we'll adjust that later on and fix it all up. It's not an issue. The most important thing here for me is just laying everything in, right? Is there any muscle detail that I need to put in? Is there any cloth detail I need to put in? Are the feet working? Do I need to reposition the knee? You know, like, does the face have enough structure? Do I have a plan for the belt? What's going to be dangling from it? What's going to be on his left arm versus his right arm? Is he going to have some kind of weird hair on his shoulder? Spoiler alert, he is going to have that. You know, the scale of the skulls, is that correct? You know, if I look at those skulls being human skulls, I would imagine this is more of an orc than an ogre, but who's to say, right? I mean, I guess the Lord of the Rings films were quite clear in the size of ogres and things like that, but I'm not always a huge fan of, you know, just sticking to the brief. I just like to do my own thing here since we're having fun. I really like the incredible armor designs that they did in Lord of the Rings, which is why I'm just completely borrowing that idea here for the orc and his helmet, because I love it so much. I did modify it so it's not the same, right? They had a lot of closed helmets and closed face masks, which were unbelievably cool. And I also, by the way, you might have seen I tried to experiment with putting a couple tusks in his mouth and it didn't work out. It kind of looked weird, so I was like, nah, let's keep that one for a different design, right? So I had the idea of doing a loincloth, but my goodness, I've seen so many loincloths on ogres and trolls that it is really a trope, right? We kind of look at these things and go like, do they not have clothing designers? What's up with that, right? So I thought, let's do some leather, right? Let's do something a little bit different. It doesn't have to be spectacular. I'm not spending my entire existence trying to figure out his costume, which, by the way, is a total thing you could do, right? If you really wanted to step into this lore world, you could do that. I also thought if this guy's walking around, he probably wants to drink something, so he's going to have a horned gourd by his side to drink from, which I think is pretty badass. It's very Viking, right? So it's kind of like a mix between, I guess, this Viking world and this orc world. Very fantasy-esque. It is something he could rip off the top of an elk or something. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit morbid, but you never know, right? These guys are savages. They tend to eat man flesh and all of those things. So I'm trying to be loyal to the lore as I go here. Just outlining some value onto the character so I can see the silhouette, and so that I can, feel like I have a good base to work over, because now we're going to start tightening up the drawing and drawing over it and making it look really, really pretty. I actually had one of you guys tell me that you like me drawing with colors because it makes for interesting thumbnails and interesting finals. And look at me here, right? Drawing in black like an animal. So I quickly realized maybe I should switch over. Like, black's fine, but it's not always interesting. So I'm going to take this black and just lock the layer and turn it into purple. And then we can kind of take it from there. But this is the fun part of the drawing, right? Because all the stress is gone. You've worked out all the details. You know where everything has to go. Now you can just detail, right? Now you can just kind of get in there and put lines in for the creases and the eye sockets and the structure. And this guy has a very gorilla-esque type face. You know, it's got that big front maw on the jaw. And I really quite like this character. I think I'd like to see him in a video game or something like that. We definitely have the opportunity here to switch colors any moment now. This helmet piece, right, it has to work in perspective, so I actually work it over quite a bit, especially later on when I do the final pass. I put it into much stronger perspective, making the part near us much bigger, the part away from us much smaller. And of course matching all the angles, which is a weird angle, right? This thing's bent up, really, really bizarre. Got to keep that shape language consistent. Can work in all of that neck flesh. I really like the idea of these beady, dark eyes where they kind of maybe yellow when they look at you in the dark. put some hair on his shoulder, right? Why not? He's kind of ape-like. Makes kind of sense to me. This arm guard is made of straw. And I realize that it's actually quite weird to try and convince someone of straw. So you have to eliminate quite a lot of lines and create negative space in order to be convincing of the texture when you're using line art. Because if this was a paintbrush, right, you could just lean on the paintbrush to make mistakes, right? To make those happy accidents that give you those brush marks that looks like real straw because it gets thin. Really like these spikes. I love making them jagged. It's like, why would it be perfect, right? These guys are crazy, right? They're gonna forge these in the worst conditions ever. You know, it's probably rusty, probably seen some battle. I played with the idea of putting some hair on his tricep there, but it really didn't work. I was like, nah, let's keep it for the shoulders. You know, we can always adjust later on if this was to be fleshed out into an actual character. But sometimes you just want something to have a better silhouette and not compromise that. By the way, if you guys want a little weird drawing tip for male versus female characters, male characters tend to have much more horizontal belly buttons than female characters. So that's actually a little hack. So here, if I used a round belly button, you would know this is a female, right? Inherently, right? You would know. I'm joking, of course. You guys would have no idea because it doesn't look like a female at all. Or a male, who knows what this thing is, right? So yeah, I've got some anatomy in there. I've got, I'm not too focused in on line weight because I'm going to do that in the final pass, which I'm not going to record because you guys would be so bored. Oh my goodness, it'd be like a million hours of me detailing and removing and adding and adjusting line weights and all that kind of stuff. It's really not even something I do for clients unless I'm afforded the time. And I really just want to listen to like 5 albums in a row. You know, I'll just queue up a bunch of music and I'll just listen to endless amounts of music while I'm detailing so that I don't even have to process with my brain. I can just turn off and detail. And that's the beauty of having everything solved and drawn in, right? Because this pass here, it could be good enough, right, to kind of hand over. It's not my favorite. I would still want to work into even just the face a little bit more to kind of get it a bit more solid. But you can see I'm spending a bit more time with the horn here because it needs a lot of perspective adjustment. It needs more fundamentals. It needs to be curved a bit more. So yeah, I'm going to spend some time with that, just getting the read on it to look like what it should. I'm adding just a bit of texture as well into the ivory itself. So this is interesting. This is like a tooth necklace hanging from his belt, right? And I've seen something similar to this on a couple designs and I quite liked it. And I thought if we combine it with the leather, I think it will make that area rich enough for us to believe that he could wear it that way, right? So really what's happening here is he's wearing some kind of cloth that's dangling leather. So I'm not sure if that was the best idea in the world. Maybe I should have just kept it cloth or just kept it leather, but you know, the final product is the final product and it looks fine to me. But, you know, maybe that could be a note from an art director after the fact and just go like, hey, we passed this back and forth. What we really think is you should change it like that. And I'll be like, cool, let's go do that. Let's adjust it. Let's change out the material or whatever it might be, or make variations, right? You could do a bunch of these as a lineup and just change the armor, change the clothing, change the helmet. You could do a bunch of stuff with this. You could create a whole cast of NPCs if you really wanted to. And therein lies the joy of drawing, right? Just coming up with something and just iterating on it and having fun. Man, these weeks are so fun for me to draw for you guys because it's just so no pressure. I just kind of get to pick a design, draw it out, and chat with you. So this week marks the week that I'm writing my 31st newsletter. So if you guys don't know about the newsletter, you can head over to 101artschool.com. Link in the description, probably. And you can just wait there for like 2 seconds and a pop-up will show up and you can subscribe to our newsletter. And the newsletter is really cool because it's an opportunity for me to share my knowledge of the industry from the various years that I've been in it, doing different things and noticing trends. And it's all theoretical, right? It's all the stuff that you don't really get to hear about because maybe you're not in the industry yet, or perhaps you are, but you haven't heard these particular ideas or stories. And I think it's not anecdotal, it's actually designed to be useful. So anything I put up there every week on Thursday, I send out a newsletter, and it's designed to just be, good feels and good advice, things you can think about for the week. Perhaps it's ideas you haven't thought about yet. Perhaps it's new trends in the industry. Perhaps it's concerns of the industry that's happening at the moment. I like to address all that kind of stuff there because it's just so much easier to have an audience who cares versus me just throwing it up here and hoping that you guys care about stuff that maybe you never even thought about before, right? And who knows, maybe some of you have no interest in doing this professionally, right? Maybe that's not your plan. So here's the before, right? So now we're going to see the after of the cleanup. It's quite a big difference. You'll see, boom, right? The character is nice and clean. The face is all recognized. We're going to go back to the previous version of this quickly so you can see it one more time. Here's the before. And here is the after. All right, so we're just going to throw a little bit of value on this character, and we're going to call it done. So thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you watching this far if you've made it this far. Otherwise, have yourself a wonderful week ahead. And if you're looking for any kind of personal mentorship to help you with your art, you can click the link in the description below and join us. Otherwise, have a fantastic one.